With Nagaro's diverse range of resilience engineering services, you can build robust and reliable systems and ensure business continuity. Our tailored solutions ensure that your brand has the unbeatable advantage of staying at the top, even during unforeseen events.
Hello, welcome everyone. So I'm so excited to um, welcome Kennedy here again. So for those of you OG Chaos Carnival fans who have been with us since the time we launched it, Kennedy was our guest back then, and I'm so glad that he has joined us back here in the third round again. So for folks who are new, Kennedy Torkura is a seasoned cybersecurity professional with over a decade of experience in cloud security. In his talk today, Practice Makes Perfect, Kennedy will share his insights on the topics and provide practical tips for incident responders to use security chaos engineering to improve their incident response capabilities. So, yeah, without further ado, take it away. It seems like you're muted. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you so much, Cyan. I will just share my screen right away. All right. I'm super excited to be here today for today's conference for Chaos Carnival 2023. Thank you so much to the organizers for making it possible for this conference to hold. Yeah, I'm going to be talking on the topic Practice Makes Perfect Security Chaos Engineering for Incident Responders. So a few words about myself. As I already introduced, my name is Kennedy Torkura. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Mitigant. Mitigant is a cloud security company that is based in Berlin. So we are the first company that offers security chaos engineering as a service. Before starting the company, I've been in cybersecurity for over 11 years. I also did doctoral research at the Hasso-Plattner Institute, and actually that is where I started doing research into the application of chaos engineering to cybersecurity. Also worked at different companies in different security roles, and I'm a member of the AWS Community Builders Program. So what are we going to be talking about? Yeah, we have the agenda is not so much. We're going to be looking at security chaos engineering, just the definition of it, what it is, and then we will look at cloud security incident response. After that, we're going to be looking at the limitations of traditional incident response exercises or simulations, and then we will look at how we can use security chaos engineering to make the whole incident response and process to be more effective. And I will walk you through an example security chaos engineering experiment. So just in order to define, to put it simply, security chaos engineering is the application of the principles of chaos engineering to cybersecurity. However, for the sake of having a more concise definition, I have taken the definition provided by Aaron Reinhardt, who happens to be actually one of the figures, one of the people who started thinking this way. So he defined security chaos engineering as the identification of security control failures through proactive experimentation to build confidence in the system's ability to defend against malicious conditions in production. That's kind of mouthful, definition, but I kind of highlighted the portions that I think are really important for understanding what security chaos engineering is all about. And also to kind of make the whole definition and understanding more tangible, I came up with this mind map of security chaos engineering. And I think it might not be very visible to you, but essentially, the mind map is designed to allow people to quickly understand what security chaos engineering is. And it answers 5 kinds of questions: what it is, why you should practice security chaos engineering, where you should practice it, who should practice it, and how you should go about practicing it. For today, we will just look at two parts of this mind map, which is basically who should practice security chaos engineering and actually where you should practice it. So who should practice security chaos engineering, which I will also refer to as SCE for short. I might interchange it. Sorry for that. But essentially, because the application of SCE is really broad, as we will see in the later slides, I think that it is beneficial to different kinds of cyber security professionals. And I'm talking about security engineers, detection engineers, incident response teams, SOC teams. All of these different cybersecurity professionals can actually practice security chaos engineering. And the cool thing is it's not restricted to the technical teams. Even for non-technical professionals, for example, the communications experts or the PR people who are responsible for protecting the reputation of companies, especially in the aftermath of an incident, these folks can also benefit from security chaos engineering because during like a security game day, they can actually, based on the events, be able to scope out exactly how they will relay information either to the public or to the customers of the company, so they can practice their skills effectively. Now, where to conduct SCE? This is a common question I get from people, and essentially, you can practice it anywhere you want. I think most people will like to start from the local environment, like their on their laptops, for example. Eventually, maybe you might want to do that in the development environment also, or the staging environment is somewhere you might think about it. And these environments, these are just examples. Companies have different kinds of environments. The most important thing is, at the end of the day, you want to practice SCE in production, because that is where you gain the most advantages or the most benefits. That is where you're defending against attackers. That is where your crown jewels, your most precious, components are in the production, and that is where you want to protect. Right. So this is a high level diagram of of the process of a security chaos engineering experiment. So on the left side here, you got your security faults, and your security faults, we will see some examples in the next slides. But basically, just imagine you want to see the way what happens if an S3 bucket becomes public, right? So you define a hypothesis, and then basically, when you define the hypothesis, you will inject that let's call it security fault into a target system. And as I said before, this is something you can do across the entire stack. So, for example, in the Kubernetes security team, they came up with what they call the 4Cs of cloud native security, which is basically the code layer, the orchestration layer, the Docker layer, and basically the cloud layer. So you can inject your faults across any of these, depends on what you want to test. And the next point, the next part or the next step is you're going to be observing to see what happens based on what you've just done. Um, Importantly, the idea of injecting these faults is to see whether your security controls are effective. Um, these are things like your preventive controls or your detective or corrective controls. They are supposed to protect your system. They are supposed to prevent attackers from getting in, or to detect when attackers are there, or to recover after an attack. So at the end, the core of what you're doing is to see if there are any violations of security attributes, and this boils down to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Here is an example experiment, which is basically designed to see what happens when an S3 bucket becomes public. I really hope this is visible to you. But the most important thing here is this experiment has about 6 steps. We will not go into all of the steps. However, you can see that you start from injecting an attack against a bucket, and you want to observe a couple of things. For example, if there's any notification from your systems when the bucket becomes public, you want to see whether you have, if, for example, if you have turned on a notification, or let's say a threat detection system like guard duty on AWS, you want to see whether there are findings there, if you can even locate the findings, if you can even make sense of the findings. For some advanced teams, they actually have connected such a system to a messaging service like Slack, and you will expect to get the messages. You can ask questions around things like if you got the Slack notification, or how long it actually took the message to get to you, or maybe how long it took you to react, like to actually, to make the bucket that was made public, to make it private again. So these are just some examples of things you can do, during a security chaos engineering experiment. Now, one of the fundamental ideas of security chaos engineering is the feedback loop. And the feedback loop is designed to allow you to, to make decisions based on evidence, and to make decisions really, really fast. This is actually designed to overcome one of the major problems we have in security, and the problem is that the fact that it takes a long time for managers, security managers, or security teams to be able to understand or evaluate the return on security investments. So, and the feedback loop allows you to easily get feedback about how your security systems are behaving in a very short manner. And we will not go deeply into this, but just at a high level, you have the planning stage where you plan your experiments, you execute them. In the next stage, you monitor, as we saw before. And when you monitor, you're beginning to gain some lessons from what you see, and you basically analyze what you have seen to make decisions, and then you acquire some insights from your analysis. And this has to be done iteratively so that you will continuously harden your security system. So as I said before, you might come back to this experiment on a second iteration, and either you're picking the same bucket that you actually executed before. In this case, you made the bucket public. You might choose the same bucket, or ideally you might just pick another bucket, because in a realistic scenario, you will want to check all the buckets, or maybe the buckets that you think have precious information, or have things like customer information and things like that. So let's begin to talk about incident response. And one of the interesting things about incident response here, actually about incident response and the relationship it has with chaos engineering, is we can trace the roots of chaos engineering to Jesse Robbins. So Jesse Robbins actually is one of the people who started thinking about chaos engineering, and he was kind of known as the master of disaster when he worked back then at Amazon. And he was tasked with keeping systems available, and he actually got that motivation, from his training as a firefighter. So he was kind of he was part of a firefighting team, and he knew that for him to be able to perform well as a firefighter, he needed to train. And this is kind of what we see. Firefighters, they train a lot, and they are able to, the training, kind of the quality of training and the intensity of their training helps them to perform well in the face of real incidences. And what we see from real firefighters, we see there are similarities between what they do in the physical world and what we do in the digital world. So, for example, when firefighters are responding to emergencies, they are not sure of the exact problem. They might not be sure of the dangers they are going to face, but it's their responsibility to go there, either to save lives, to save properties, and they go there with that intention to do that. And it's similar to in the digital world also. In the face of an attack, the attackers also, they use different tactics, right? And you might not know the exact tactics they're doing, and you will be under a lot of pressure to make decisions, to understand and to act. And this is a similarity, and that's why it requires a lot of efforts, a lot of training, a lot of simulations. That is one reason why we think about using security chaos engineering for incident response. And there are other similarities we can see here also. Things like, you have to make a lot of decisions on that when you're under an attack. When it comes to digital part of incident response, you might not be making. There's no manual labor there, but you have a lot of thinking, you have a lot of pressure on your mental systems, and you have to practice consistently so that you can perform well in the face of adversity. So let us look at the cloud security incident response, and this is actually a diagram put up by the AWS security incident response guide. And it has 4 stages: preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and the last one is post incident activity. And under preparation, there are a lot of things that you got to do there. You have to enable detective controls. You have to verify that your tools are working properly. You have to prepare playbooks, both manual and automated playbooks. And then under the operations part, there are a lot of things related to the NIST, the phases of incident response that are defined by the NIST, which basically fall into detect, analyze, contain, eradicate, and recover. Then for the post-incident activity, you have to iterate on the outcomes of the security events. You have to improve the effectiveness of your response, and you have to learn from all the incidences or if from the simulations that you have actually conducted. And one of the key points in the AWS, their incident response guide is they recommend regular simulations. So you have to, for you to be able to do all of the things that we saw in the last slide properly, you have to simulate the activities. You have to do them. It's not enough to have a process that you never test. And so simulations are one of the most tangible and one of the effective ways for incident response to be conducted effectively. However, there are a few problems with traditional incident response simulation, which security teams have been doing, in traditional systems. The first problem is most of these simulations or maybe exercises are actually designed. They're actually manual, so they're designed along the lines of treadmill exercises or tabletop exercises. These are really manual exercises where people just sit down and they discuss, and they don't oftentimes they don't put into practice the lessons. And this is the way most of the incident response exercises are designed. And this is not very effective in a cloud environment because you have to actually practice what you need to do. You need to put it in practice. You need to basically get your hands dirty for you to be sure that you can perform well if there is an actual incident. The other limitation is, you know, even for the software-based simulation approaches that are being used by some security teams, these are based on static resources. They're based on static scenarios. And what I mean by that is, for example, we looked at earlier at this scenario where we had this S3 bucket. And as I was saying, this S3 bucket here, after the first iteration, if you're going to do a second iteration, maybe you have decided to harden your environment. You have decided to kind of improve maybe on the notifications, and you will want to do that on the same set of environment. There are certain simulation tools today that basically they basically deploy an environment, run simulations against it. Then at the end of that, they basically decommission the environment or basically destroy it. And while this is kind of a good way to start, eventually it doesn't give you the lessons. You don't really learn from it because you basically destroy the environment after the simulation, and then more realistically, you have to continue to practice on the same environment as previously, so you can actually even measure to see how you're performing over time. And this is one area that security chaos engineering helps, because the idea is you have a system that continuously runs against a kind of a realistic system, which makes it much more practical and makes it more realistic. Now, the last point here is basically, you know, most of the traditional systems, they do not interact with other systems. And what I mean by that is, as incident response begins to mature, you see there's a lot of automation. If you go through recent incident response, and like the documents or the processes that have been put out there, automation is key. And automation means that you have APIs that are exposed. So you expect that the lessons can be actually directly sent over to the response system. So, for example, if the guard duty was not well configured, as we saw in the last example, you can basically configure it yourself, or you can automate the whole process. And this is where a system like chaos engineering, security chaos engineering, has a huge advantage, because it is designed on the basis of automation, and they can interact with other systems, and they can basically make it much easier to be effective. All right, so I will quickly go through this example because of time. So this is an example of an AWS ransomware attack scenario, and here you start this example here just to maybe can run it like in a game day, security game day, and you want to test your systems and test how your person, how your team is able to function, how they're able to remember their responsibilities. So it starts with you creating a user called Bob, and when the user is created, you want to check whether you get any kind of notification from your maybe from your CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management System, or things like AWS config. Then the next step is the attacker basically goes into the EKS cluster and basically compromises one of the pods, maybe in search of credentials that will allow him to elevate his privileges. In this case here, you want to see whether the Kubernetes security tools or the other cloud security tools are able to pick up this kind of suspicious activities, because this is how an attacker will actually behave. And the last stage here is basically, skipping many other stages. Maybe he encrypts a bucket and asks for ransomware. And at this point in time, this is where the traditional incident response kicks in, and you begin to respond. You begin to check your run books, or you want to see whether your backups are working. And this is a very this could be very tedious if it is not practiced beforehand. If you haven't checked your backups, how effective they are, or if you can actually use them, or if the data gets corrupted when you're trying to pull to kind of deploy your backups. So that actually brings me to the end of the talk. So basically, we know that from the talk, one of the highlights here is security chaos engineering has a lot of benefits for cybersecurity. One of it is that it allows realistic and automated cloud security incident response exercises, and also it is a powerful way for you to be able to achieve cyber and cloud and cyber resiliency. Thank you very much for listening to me. I wish you a nice conference, and we hang here for questions. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the awesome talk, Kennedy. So we have a few questions. I'll just bring a few of them on stage. And the first one is by Glenn. He asked how SCE is different from red or blue teaming, if you can remind him that.
All right. Yep, that's a very interesting question. How is SE different from red and blue teaming? Yeah. So there are there's a lot of differences, but let me mention like two or three of them. The first difference here between red and blue teaming is you realize that these teams are, a lot of the efforts they do are manual, right? So they do use a lot of manual efforts, and you cannot deploy them in a way that it should be automated. SCE or even chaos engineering is designed for automation. You want these things to happen automatically end to end with little or no human intervention. The second difference I see is usually for red and blue teams, you see that there is a lot of um, you require a lot of human input, like in terms of knowledge, right? These are highly specialized teams, and that is why a lot of companies actually outsource red and blue teaming to other consultants. When it comes to security chaos engineering, it is built based on the in-house knowledge, which can be gotten automatically, or the person who is actually using the tools doesn't need to know so much, because the tools actually are designed to actually get the knowledge by themselves, and this makes it much easier to use. So I think there are other differences, but I will stop at this at these two differences. I hope it's clear.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kennedy, for answering that. I think we can take another one, which is this one. Can you use outputs from threat modeling as theories for SE experiments?
Oh yeah, sure. I think this is a very good way for starting SE experiments, because during threat modeling you actually get the pain points or the areas that are not really clear to people, or the exact threat vectors that are more important. So I think that one of the things for security case engineering is you want to kind of prioritize what you're doing. So threat modeling already allows you to understand your threat landscape, and so you can basically just use the output from there as a hypothesis that you craft and carry your SE experiments.
Got it. Got it. Makes so much sense. Cool. If you guys have any more questions, I'll urge you to join the Chaos Carnival Slack channel and ask it there. And I'll also pin Kennedy there, and then you can get your answers so that we can keep the conversation going. But yeah, due to the interest of time, I think we have to move on to the next one. But yeah, thank you so much, Kennedy, for joining, and it was an awesome session.
Thank you so much. My pleasure